This is the only video on Powerless by Lauren Roberts you need to watch because, like the many TikTok or romantasy girlies out there, I have seen countless videos absolutely both loving and despising this book. People have an opinion on everything, and today we are going to discuss if Powerless is really worth the hype. Often had me laughing out loud in the book. Disappointing would be the way that I describe the last 30% of the book that I've read. Gigantic betrayal and death wishes. I cannot believe how ironic it is. Really funny banter and flirting served on a platter, foreshadowed line you've ever heard. You know that meme where it's like, what are the differences between these two images? They're the same. They're literally the same. This book is being compared to Red Queen, The Hunger Games, The Selection, all of which are literally my favorite books. With tropes like rivals to lovers, who did this to you, he falls first, and more. It's no wonder that the BookTok girlies like myself are rushing to read this book. And with book 2 now just coming out, I'm hoping this will be your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Throughout this video, we will be talking about everything related to this book, from what it's about, how it's received by the public, its tropes, romance, characters, plot twists, and depending on how far along you are in the story, there will be something for you to get excited about here. My name is Lauren, and I'm super excited for you to go on this reading journey with me, because I know I'm also quite excited to read this book. If you are wondering what all the hype is about Powerless and what it's really about, we'll talk all about that very shortly in part 1 of this video. I'll tell you my opinions as I read throughout part 2 of this video, and we'll get into all my spoiler-filled thoughts in part 3. So, first published by Simon & Schuster on January 31st, 2023, so about a year and a half ago as this video dates, this book has over 250,000 ratings on Goodreads with a very strong average rating of 4.26, with 50% of readers giving this book a 5 out of 5 stars. Typically for me, if a book has a 4.1, 4.2 or above on Goodreads, I take it as it will be objectively a good book. This book was also nominated for Best Young Adult Fantasy and Science Fiction for 2023 and came in 5th place with over 28,000 votes. So right off the bat, my hopes are quite high going into this book. Now, this is Lauren Roberts' debut novel, which makes all of those stats even more impressive. And while I did not know this before, as I looked into Powerless a little bit more and the author herself, she actually shared her thoughts and tidbits of the book on her TikTok about a year and a half up until now, all about her book, and has developed into quite a lovely following on TikTok with over 500,000 followers, and I have to say, she is quite entertaining. Now, what is Powerless actually about? Let's hear it in the author's words herself.
So I wrote a book when I was 18. And the best way to describe it is if this book and this book had a baby that did not resemble either of the parents. In short, I wrote what I loved, which naturally is a fantasy enemies to lovers romance with lots of tropes.
After reading this book is very much a combination of Red Queen and The Hunger Games. I also wanted to share the description that's given on Goodreads so you get the book in its full context. She is the very thing he spent his whole life hunting. He is the very thing she spent her whole life pretending to be. Only the extraordinary belong in the kingdom of Ilia, the exceptional, the empowered, the elites. Power these elites have possessed for decades were graciously gifted to them by the plague, though not all were fortunate enough to both survive the sickness and reap the reward. Those born ordinary are just that, ordinary. And when the king decreed that all ordinaries be banished in order to preserve his elite society, lacking in ability suddenly became a crime, making Peyton Gray a felon by fate and a thief by necessity. Surviving in the slums as an ordinary is no simple task, and Peyton knows this better than most. Having been trained by her father to be overly observant since she was a child, Peyton poses as a psychic in the crowded city, blending in with the elites as best she can in order to stay alive and out of trouble. Easier said than done. When Peyton unsuspectingly saves one of Ilia's princes, she finds herself thrown into the purging trials. The brutal competition exists to showcase the elite powers, the very thing Peyton lacks. If the trials and the opponents within don't kill her, the prince she's fighting feelings for certainly will if he discovers what she is. Completely ordinary. Now, especially as someone who's a fan of Red Queen, The Hunger Games, and The Selection, this type of book honestly falls exactly with what I love to read and will continue to read time and time again. And on that note, the people this book is recommended for is for fans of Sarah J. Maas and fans of those books that I previously named. So from what I can tell, this is a classic BookTok romantasy girlies dream book. Definitely fits my criteria. I will say though, I almost chose not to read this book because recently on Instagram I had been reading more reviews of this book and I had seen a lot of negative opinions around this book, and like strong negative opinions at that. But alas, here we are. I'm trusting the Goodreads reviews, I'm trusting the positive things I've seen and the comparison to my other favorite books that will allow me to hopefully like this book. So on that note, I'm going to start reading, and let's hope for the very best, because I know I, for one, am very excited to know if Powerless is really worth the hype. so the reason I chose to start filming right now is because I have just got to this quote in the book and I cannot believe how ironic it is, and I imagine it is majorly foreshadowing what is to come. I won't share the characters' names, but the quote is from character 1, "Promise me you'll stay alive long enough to stab me in the back." Character 2, "I laugh loudly. That's been my goal all along." Tell me that's not the most like served on a platter foreshadowed line you've ever heard, or at least that's me. I'm currently 39% done and I'm actually really enjoying my time listening and reading this book. What I am finding most of all is just how true these comparisons are from other books to Powerless. This book has been compared to, like I mentioned, Red Queen, The Hunger Games, Selection, and I can very clearly tell why. This book, if I had to summarize, is like 70, maybe 80% Red Queen, 20% The Hunger Games, and 10% The Selection. There are a lot of parallels, especially from Red Queen, which I'm not complaining about. That's nor a good nor bad thing. It's just crazy to me how 3 of my favorite books I can evidently see combined into what is Powerless. A few quotes I also want to share as well from the book that further prove this theory. Number 1, these are 2 very minor characters that are literally only in one scene, at least so far, but are 2 little boys named Marcus and Cal. The main 2 brothers in Red Queen, their names are Maven and Cal. The second one, the heir to be the new king in this kingdom, says something to someone at the castle, which is, "Remind me to show you the garden sometime," which is very Selection, where the heir to the throne, Maxon, says that to America. "Let me show you the garden sometime, you'll really like it." So the flirting games, very similar. The third one is from Peyton, our main female lead, which is, "I am no one's pawn," and goes on about being a pawn in this whole scheme and what's going on, which is very Hunger Games and Peeta Malark. And the last one is secret dance lessons to prepare for a big up-and-coming ball, which again is so Red Queen, not to mention countless other examples. Hayden to me is so wild, witty, funny. I really like her character. I've literally been finding myself audibly laughing at certain lines just because of how funny she is, very organic to her character. And she also often reminds me of Mare Barrow from Red Queen quite a bit, and also has silver hair as well. And in terms of the plot surrounding Peyton, we do officially learn that she is ordinary, powerless as one might say, and in a world full of elites where everyone has every power you can think of, if she is caught, she will be dead. So because of that, we get to learn more about how her father trained her to be a psychic, essentially just becoming the Sherlock Holmes extraordinaire. We get to see how she rationalizes very small details on everyone and how she's able to perform this on such a large scale. And I'm 39% down the book and no one's caught on to this so far. She can lie easily, make her lies believable, to the point where she's literally in these royal trials and no one's caught on to the fact that she is ordinary. Especially the interesting part is we now learn there's some kind of uprising, rebellion, as is in every dystopian novel like The Hunger Games, The Selection, and Red Queen. And she finds out that there's this group of ordinaries and elites that are trying to overthrow the kingdom to some extent, and she is very interested to now be a part of it. So I imagine that will go on to be very interesting throughout the rest of the book. And how she decides to play on getting caught or not getting caught for being an ordinary, and how she chooses to share her secret. I'm just now at the part where the trials are about to begin, and I have to say I loved watching Peyton get selected for the trials. Everything from the huge fight that allowed her to get the notice of other people in the slums, how people voted her in, and how it's just a little bit different from the other similar-esque books that I've read. There's no draw. It's not necessarily by accident. It's by a sheer show of how powerful she really is. I really like that show of she's actually really good at what she does. I'm very excited to keep reading and share more of my thoughts, so I'm going to go and do that. Not gonna lie guys, disappointing would be the way that I describe the last 30% of the book that I've read. I'm now 70% done the way through and we are at trial number 2. And since the last time I spoke to you guys, I found the first like 40% of what I had read to be very exciting. The first trial was slightly what I expected, kind of very Hunger Gamesy, as I've said before. But then after we got some romance parts, some interesting fight scenes. But then after the trial, until now where we're about to start the second trial, not that many really exciting things have happened, honestly. We've gotten a lot of banter, a lot of flirting. We had another ball where nothing really happened. There was a brawl at the ball that happened, which also wasn't that exciting. I still love Lenny. I still love Adina. Kit is also now falling more for Homegirl, so we have both princes after Homegirl Peyton. But again, that's not really that different from the first 40% of the book. I want to say I did like the first trial, and I also liked the aftermath of the first trial. What I mean by that, it was really interesting to see the first-hand perspective of the characters, especially when Sadie died, as well as our two main characters distracting each other, thinking no one's watching. And then we get to watch them see themselves replayed in front of a live audience and be questioned on some of those things. It was kind of intriguing to watch that. Outside of the trial though, in terms of just things between the trials, I stand by saying nothing that exciting was happened. Hayden goes to the loot where she aims to find the people in charge of the rebellion, uprising, whatever. And it's honestly kind of underwhelming. Lenny is there, the guard, okay. And then there's a few other people there, someone who knew her father, they give her a task. And honestly, it was very Red Queen, where our main character wants to join this uprising and they give her a task to prove herself, whatever, and now she's gonna go do it. And lo and behold, the key to doing that is by securing the trust of one of the princes.
Wow. Crazy.
You know that meme where it's like, what are the differences between these two images? They're the same. They're literally the same. So that's something where I'm like, yeah, that should have been a really big event, but to me, it just wasn't that unique. It wasn't that special. I am excited to see the next trial begin because I feel like hopefully something exciting will happen here. We are closing in on the last 30% of the book, and to me, if an ending is not good, the book itself is just not good. So I'm hoping it gets better because honestly, the first 40% was really good, was really interesting. And even though I'm enjoying my read, I'm waiting for something to hook me back in. So we'll find out if it comes. Okay, I finished Powerless. My review of this book can be summarized as if I wanted to read Red Queen, I would have read Red Queen. If I wanted to read The Hunger Games, I would have read The Hunger Games. I love this author. She seems super cute, super slay. But when she said this earlier,
Had a baby that did not resemble either of the parents. And
I just don't know if I can get behind it. I just finished reading this book and I have a lot of good things that I really liked about this book and also some things I just want to pull apart a little bit more. And most related to that, I'm very torn on how to rate this book. Off the bat, I will say I had a lot of fun reading this book, which I think is the number one thing you should always go into for really any kind of fictional story. I read it via the audiobook and the ebook for part of it. I do think the book unnecessarily dragged in the middle a little bit. Given this book is at 523 pages, I think it could have been cut down. But I was almost always engaged in the characters, the plot, the romance. And while I have honestly every intention to read the next book in this series, I just cannot get over how often I made a note of how something would remind me of Red Queen. I'm not talking about how they both have societies where the power structure is between two groups of people, one not having magic, one having magic, or big epic fight scenes. You can take inspiration from those things. I love Red Queen, and I'm all for taking inspiration from Red Queen, but there was just so many small specific moments where I'm just like, okay, is this taking inspiration? Which I will share with you now. We follow a silver-haired female main character, and our female main character is a thief out of necessity. The female main character's closest female friend or sister makes a living sewing and later has her sewing hand broken. The female main character meets one of the princes before we know they are the prince. Two characters who are brothers we meet are named Cal and something that starts with an M, Maven or Marcus. We learn of the resistance, who wants justice and a free society, and the female main character knows she must join them as soon as she hears about them. We also find out someone close to her is already a part of the resistance, and she is not the first one from her family to secretly join, not that she knows it beforehand. There's a girl who wants the prince's attention and so just hates the female main character on sight and tries to kill her many times. Both of our princes want the female main character as their love interest. There are secret dance lessons between the prince and the female main character. There is betrayal foreshadowing. Red Queen, anyone can betray anyone, and Powerless, promise me you'll stay alive long enough to stab me in the back. Female main character believes she can get the incoming king to see the wrongdoings of the kingdom kingdom and not repeat them like his father, and the female main character tells the upcoming king he needs to see his kingdom and people and can't hide in the castle. Plus others. Not to mention the same with the Hunger Games. The moments that remind me of the Hunger Games aren't as crazy as the ones I just shared from Red Queen, where the list does not go on and on and on, because of course, while the concept of murderous trials of some kind are not new to anyone, there were some smaller moments that did seem to stand out. Such as turning a murderous competition meant to remind everyone of a terrible time into a reason for celebration, doing public interviews for the elites of the society before the competition so people know who they want to support, not wanting to be a pawn in their game, having someone play tricks on your mind so you hear and see things that aren't true in the competition, the two main characters caring for each other in the murderous competition while being filmed for all to see, the two main characters having a what's your favorite color conversation for friendship purposes, and archery being featured as one of the female main characters' skills. And an honorable shout out to the selection as well, because one of the first interactions we get between the incoming king, Prince Kit, and our main homegirl Peyton is when he asks her to go on a walk to the gardens, which I'm like, oh, so selection. Now, for the most part, I did like the tropes in this book, especially the male POV of him falling first, which is something I don't think we see in Red Queen, the Hunger Games, the selection, or any other similar counterpart. It's typically always the female perspective we're given. However, we do get this one line which really made me laugh out loud, which is, I hear him take a breath, only realizing then that he had been holding it. Definitely a YA book. Moving away from the things I didn't really like in terms of the similarities to the other books, one thing I really did like though was the romance. We have one main romance storyline between Peyton and Prince Kai, and I honestly really loved them together and how their story progressed. The romance is described as rivals to lovers, which definitely rang true. They have intense physical fights with each other that show that they are equals in terms of strength and wit. They have a cute secret dance scene. We have some really funny banter and flirting between the two of them, honestly, throughout the whole book. We get to see the trust that they build in each other as well. I really loved the scene where we have this quiet, genuine conversation between them in the gardens towards the later half of the book, how they might try to deny feeling for each other, how Peyton especially might try to push her feelings away, but we can definitely see them start to grow stronger. I just honestly really liked them, and I honestly thought Kai might have run off with Peyton at the end of the book, but I was pleasantly surprised, and honestly I'm really glad that he didn't go that way and ended up staying back for his brother, which I'll talk about more in a bit. They now have some absolutely major things to work through, like gigantic betrayal and death wishes, but I think that will make the second book all the more interesting because I feel like that's the main reason I want to read the next book, is to just see how their specific relationship progresses. We also have this love triangle lightly with Prince Kit, the incoming king, who just really loved how authentic Peyton was, as he didn't really get that many authentic people in his life, as a lot of people just treated him as the future king. He was definitely starting to grow feelings for her, even if we only saw small bits of it. That never would have worked out because we get to see Peyton's, mind, and she already knows she's going to betray him, and she felt he was very similar to his father. And on that note, honestly, I basically loved every character in this book, especially the main characters. Peyton, Kit, Kai, even Adina, who's more of a side character, but we get to see quite a bit of her too, as they each have their own unique goals, dreams, backstory, and purpose in the story. Peyton was so witty and often had me laughing out loud in the book, throughout the book. Her backstory also really helps to solidify why she is the way she is. It's believable, and the way she acts going forward really makes sense based on how she was raised and what she's had to go through. Her learning through her 10 plus years of training and fighting to become the weapon she is also very cool to read about, especially when we see she's on an equal playing field essentially to Kai, who's also been training for that same amount of time in different ways. She really is that strong female main character archetype, but I feel like she played part well. Adina is also such a nice friend and such a nice boost of positivity in this story. And I hate that she was killed at the end, but for the plot, I kinda loved it. She always brings out a part to Peyton that we as the reader don't get to see, because Peyton is very closed off. So it's nice that Adina gets to bring these moments out of Peyton that are softer, more open, and shows us a bit more dimension to her character, and also Adina's as well, and just the type of person she is. Kai was down bad early on. We get to understand that even though he is branded as this monster and killer, he even has morals when doing so. though. He doesn't just blindly follow his father like his brother does, which is what we get to see from when he saved a child earlier on in the book. I also love this brotherly trust and love between Kit and Kai. Even as things got crazier as the book went on, they still turned to each other to do little fights or drink at the ball, and it was just very wholesome to see that even when different things happened throughout the book, they still turned to each other consistently for support. And I also am glad that they chose each other at the end of the book, and I'm really honestly worried for their relationship as book 2 starts, because I really don't want them to lose each other or lose that bond they have, even with Jackson there as well. And on that note, the side characters, well, I really liked Gale, I liked Jax, I liked Ace. They were just interesting to read about, even if they were, you know, a more evil character or a smaller character. Each of them were interesting to read about and brought something out of other people around them that allowed our main characters to shine more and added more depth to our story. I wish you would have seen Blair in less of like a pure hatred context in the book, but maybe like Red Queen, we'll see that switch potentially in the next books. Either way, I don't really care about her that much. She literally killed homegirl Adina, but whatever. I understand. The only character I wish we got to see more of or learn more about was Lenny. Given this man was Hayden's guard and a resistance member, I feel like we learned literally nothing about him or nothing that shocking or surprising. Their bond isn't that strong either. Feels like his presence was largely just so when Peyton wanted to join the resistance, saw a familiar face there. I don't know. Other than Lenny though, honestly, no notes. And on that note, from a plot perspective, other than this book being very similar to Red Queen and the Hunger Games, like I've mentioned, the twists overall from a plot perspective that Powerless puts on them, how Lauren Roberts did it in a new way. I like how the trials were both private and in front of a live audience, how the characters were forced to watch on a silver screen in front of the audience back the first trial and then add their comments onto it, how in the trials you had to both work individually and in a team, and it showed, okay, who's actually going to work with who and whose good nature or bad nature will come out more in these scenarios. And even though we never really got to finish the trials, I still thought they were quite interesting to read about for the most part. The Resistance definitely needed some more screen time, as I was not fully buying it, because we really don't get to learn that much about the Resistance other than that they've been 10 years in the making and now is the grand time they're going to showcase themselves, and oh yeah, your dad was actually one of our leaders. But that's all the information we get. Their first introduction as well, when they quote unquote start the fight during one of the first balls, wasn't that impactful as well. We later learn it was like an accident, but it didn't feel super crazy either. Like, I didn't feel like, oh my god, someone's gonna die. Even though the Prince Kai almost, you know, not died, but had to heal himself, I didn't feel like anything crazy was gonna happen, and inevitably it didn't. And then the official time where they were released into society officially in trial number 3 at the very end, I thought was definitely impactful. We then get that fight scene with the king and a whole bunch of other chaos goes on, but I feel like for that fight to really resonate with me, I need to see its impacts in book 2. I feel like I need more from the Resistance to really believe it or see its impact. I'm hoping book 2 will solve more of that and we'll get to see a lot more of the Resistance after the aftermath of book 1. I also want to talk about the plot twist, which I am normally not really good at guessing plot twists. Like in Red Queen, for example, I did not guess the plot twist, even though honestly it was right in front of my face. This book, when the whole time Hayden is talking about how the king murdered her father and she saw the whole thing. She is saying she saw with her own eyes that she saw the whole thing happen. So throughout the book, she hates the king. She hates Kit for looking like the king. She hates the king directly. She doesn't want to talk to him. All that stuff. And then the plot twist at the end is when she's about to kill the king and he goes, you know what? I never killed your dad. And we're like, okay, sure. It's actually my son, the enforcer. First kill when he was 14. Now, I didn't believe the king had killed this girl's father. Honestly, from the first moment, the king never actually kills anyone himself. We see time and time again that it's just Kai who goes and kills whoever the king says. My theory was that it was actually Kai who had done it, but with the illusion of the king over top of him by one of the illusionists or whatever in this book. Turns out it was just Peyton's own memory that had mistaken Kai for the king himself, but more or less I was on the right track with that explanation. So when it inevitably was revealed that it was actually Kai, I wasn't that surprised. So I really wish there was a little bit more payoff with this plot twist for me. Overall, I still think the ending was solid. It was good. We have a little bit of a cliffhanger between the relationship with the brothers, but the main thing being between Hayden and Kai. But overall, I wish I didn't guess it. And of course, we have to acknowledge that the book is called Powerless, which is of course going to be a huge theme in the book. It might seem obvious to Peyton, who is quite obviously powerless or ordinary throughout the whole story. It's interesting that in many situations, she's actually the powerful one, so much so that the literal king tells her she needs to stop influencing both of his sons. There are many times where Peyton does feel powerless, whether it's because of her physical lack of abilities, whether it's due to how Kai makes her feel, and what she does because of it, when she can't save Adina at the very end of the book, or even for Kai, someone who is seemingly having a lot of power, who literally goes and kills people and that's his job. He often feels powerless in physical fight situations, in this romantic situationship we have going on here with Peyton, physically in the actual trials themselves, the third one especially, in his own nightmares about what he's done to other people. We also see that theme in other characters as well, but predominantly in both Peyton and Kai. So I think obviously it just goes to show the very basic theme of you can have power, you cannot have power at the same time. It's a matter of how you use it and what you do with what you have. Nothing crazy on that theme. I think I could have expected that going into this book, but it did deliver, I think, on its message through both of those characters. Last but not least, the big question. Is Powerless by Lauren Roberts really worth the hype? From everything from the author's journey to the popular tropes included, the great banter, a guessable plot twist, fun characters, a cliffhanger ending. Is Powerless worth the hype? My vote is yes. At the end of the day, this is a fun, medium, fast-paced book set in a world that if you love Sarah J. Maas, The Hunger Games, Red Queen, The Selection, you'll probably like this book as well. Powerless adds its own spin on popular tropes and popular things in YA fantasy novels and fantasy novels in general. So if you're craving something for after those books, this gives you that very familiar world, familiar-ish characters, but does so in a different light. So I enjoyed it. I'm gonna leave it with a 4 out of 5 stars, and I will be picking up the second book. All in all, whether or not you think Powerless is worth the hype or not, let me know down below. I'm very happy that I read this book, and I am gonna read the second book, so let me know if you're interested to hear my thoughts on that one, or what aspects you want to learn more about from Reckless. And all in all, I am hoping to love that book even more than this one, as hopefully it will fix some of the problems I had with Powerless and turn it into a 5 out of 5 star read in Reckless. All in all, thank you for joining me on this reading journey, and I'll come to you all very, very soon with another video in the BookTok universe once again. Talk to you all soon. Bye!